Indiana Jones. What an absolute group of classics those movies were. Now, if like me you had a dad that grew up in the 70s, he probably shared two major franchises with you from his childhood. For me, it was Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And I think it's fair to say it's easy to see why these movies are so well received. Not only do they fit into that 80s action era watching an archaeologist beat the crap out of Nazis, but they also add historical and mystical elements to them which makes them even more engaging. Now personally, I absolutely adore the original trilogy of these movies, and that was further cemented in my brain by playing the LEGO Indiana Jones games. So when I saw that we were getting a first-person action-adventure game from the same publishers that made Wolfenstein, my god, I was excited. Now that excitement has only been enhanced by the recent gameplay that's been revealed through a load of different YouTubers that got to review the game early. Unfortunately, I was not one of them. Please do consider subscribing and maybe that can be a reality in the future. So starting from a narrative perspective, this game is set in between the second and third movie, so the Temple of Doom and the Last Crusade. And it picks up with Indy after he's recently left his fiancée, Marion Ravenwood, who I'm hoping we'll see in the game in a small aspect. Now this adventure begins following the theft of an artifact at Marshall College, which Jones investigates and gets the hell beaten out of him by some 10-foot tall dude. This leads Indy all over the globe to investigate various different sites, so he ends up going to the Vatican, he goes to the Egyptian pyramids, ends up in the Himalayas at one point, and I think he also ends up in Shanghai. And in doing all of this, he notices that there is a perfectly aligned circle around the globe, also known as the Great Circle. Now from what I can see, the general idea behind this Great Circle is that essentially it's just a raw source of energy which the Nazis are going to use to try and take over the world in some way, right? So in terms of Indiana Jones, this is treading over sort of similar territory that it has done in the other movies, but again, it's safe, it's familiar, it's exactly what you'd want to see in a game such as this. When you combine that with a female sidekick in, I believe the character's called Gina Lombardi, who's an investigator, and an incredibly evil Nazi-looking sort of boss villain to go up against, this just screams Indiana Jones, and I think this theme of replicating and honouring the classic source material is fully woven throughout the gameplay that we've seen as well. From what we've seen so far from various different channels, this game is very much more of an adventure game than an action game, which I do feel like was an important distinction for Machine Games to make when creating this game. When you think back at Indiana Jones movies, don't get me wrong, he is an absolute badass, but he's not exactly blowing away 80 Nazis with an MG42. Honestly, he sort of uses firearms as a last resort in many scenarios, because at the end of the day, he is an archaeologist, he isn't BJ Blazkowicz from Wolfenstein. And I really think that is an important distinction for people to remember when playing this game, if you aren't necessarily such a big fan of the franchise itself, is that this isn't really a first-person shooter, it is a first-person action game. Your primary weapons in many of the scenarios, realistically, are your fists, or whatever environmental weapon that you find in combat at that point. Being able to punch, shove and stun enemies is all fairly standard stuff, but to me I just feel like if you're able to use your environment to help you in combat, it just adds such a massive level of immersion to the game itself. Whether this is in the form of say just pushing an enemy off a tall ledge or even just bonking one on the head with a shovel, it really does enhance that sense of realism that you have. Of course, as Indiana Jones should have, you've got your trusty whip by your side the whole game, which does look really fun, both in terms of sort of disabling enemies and stunning them, or even just using it to climb up buildings. It's just all around a very, very unique element which you would expect to have in an Indiana Jones game. It's looking like you can also hide bodies so they can't be discovered and alert other enemies, which again is very much a staple of what you see in Indiana Jones. I am hoping that there is a way to steal their clothes and go full incognito and undercover like we have seen in the movies. But either way, this deeper emphasis on stealth just further helps convey that you aren't an unstoppable action hero. You are very much an outmatched archaeologist who survives more on his wits than on his brawn. This game also seems to have an upgrade system attached to it which will enable you to develop the stats on Indy and unlock specialist abilities. So for example, you can increase his stamina so you can carry the knocked out foes further, or you can just increase his damage so he puts a little bit more behind his power punch. Now to me, I feel like offering an upgrade system just gives such a good opportunity to develop the character how you want to. You can suit your own playstyle, which is fantastic. Similarly, it gives you the opportunity to replay the game and test out different upgrades and elements on offer to you. To me, this adds so much more values to games such as this, because once you've completed the narrative once, realistically there might not be many reasons to go do it again unless you want to 100% it. But enabling you to tailor Indy to your own playstyle gives so many different replayable experiences. I've got to say, I really like the addition of a camera in this game as well. Although Indiana Jones obviously isn't a reporter, The character Indy is always somebody who looks to seek the facts behind the situation, and through the ability of taking pictures, it allows you to not only uncover the narrative, but it allows you to do it in a more natural and in-universe way. Not to mention it also has a purpose, because by taking pictures in this game, it enables you to unlock more adventure points which you use to upgrade Indy and those abilities. Speaking of Indy's abilities, it's quite clear that this game does seem to include a lot of different puzzle sections, which again, is just a core element of the movies themselves and is a fantastic inclusion. I always thought it was fascinating in the actual movies trying to watch Indy get his way out of a certain situation using the surrounding environment, whether it's like breaking a wall or swinging across a certain branch. So when this is incorporated in the gameplay alongside a lot of the stealth elements that we've already seen, it's a very good way of varying it up for the player, and can contrast quite nicely from the action sequences, which are clearly in the game as well. So moving on from the gameplay itself for a minute, I've got to say that visually speaking, this game looks impeccable. The cutscenes themselves look amazing. Even the little traversal areas using the red line maps, it just fits perfectly. And in terms of the graphics of, say, Indiana Jones and the other characters, you can't physically get him any closer to looking like Harrison Ford, in my opinion. It looks brilliant, and he also sounds brilliant. The voice actor that they've brought in is genuinely spot on, and I feel like that's really something that you have to nail to get the fans on board. Because I'll be completely honest, if I'm playing an Indiana Jones game and it doesn't sound like Indiana Jones, it just completely takes you out of the game. Continuing along with the audio side of things, the sound design for this game is just fantastic. The little punches that you do and the whip cracks are just iconic as hell, and again, I'm really hoping there's some Wilhelm screams in there too if you push somebody down a hole. And of course you've got John Williams' score in there as well, which is always just the absolute peak of cinematic soundtracks. So hearing it transferred into the game itself is just amazing. I'm really hoping that this incredible soundtrack that this game can offer will blend lovely with the environments of the game, because again, they look incredibly immersive and just genuinely just breathtaking. Each one we've seen so far is distinct to its real geographical location, and for lack of a better phrase, it's just so Indiana Jones, whether it's sort of exploring a temple or drifting through the streets of a bazaar. Each area just highlights so much life and realism. Not to mention these areas seem very reactive to the player's actions. Some segments seem to involve environments with destructible areas, which again just adds such a level of immersion, and to me, makes you feel like you're actually playing a movie itself. Another smaller note which I've picked up on is that this game seems to actually be pretty funny. There's a clear comedic tone both in terms of the actual gameplay itself and in the cutscenes. I really like that they seem to have captured Indy's little one-liners every time you beat up an enemy. Also, just the physical comedy involved in bonking somebody on the head with a shovel, it is quite funny. I think it's fair to say that this expectation was set throughout. I mean, who could forget this in the first trailer?
It's your stupid American cartoons. Choo-choo, choo-choo, ha 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 ha.
Again, it's something that the movies were just so great at, and it feels as if this tone has transported well across to the video game media. And I think that leads nicely into overall the biggest thing that I needed to be a success in this game, which for me was that the look and the tone of it fits the original source material. And I truly think it does, both in a visual aspect, in an audio aspect, and just in terms of the narrative itself, what we know at this stage. Everything feels Indiana Jones. I know I've said that a lot this video, but it's thoroughly important to myself because I'm an existing fan and I want it to feel like the movies that I grew up watching. But more importantly, what do you guys think? Will you be picking up Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? Again, it's brilliant that it's free on Game Pass. Big props to Xbox again. Big fan of that. I absolutely will be checking this out. I think this is honestly a slam dunk of a game and genuinely could be one of the best games of the year, at least from my perspective. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you are new here and you haven't already subscribed, please do consider doing so. It means the absolute world. Anyway, thanks ever so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video sometime soon.